and caught the thing on fire in front of the customer. One of the brands that we represented at the dealership where I worked was Lotus. And as our boy Doug might say, they were full of a lot of quirks and not that many features. It was a peculiar brand to sell because the customers were a little bit strange and the cars were a little bit strange. And at this point, I'm a huge proponent of the Elise and Exige cars in particular as great automotive investments. To me, they've kind of caught Land Rover Defender-itis. There's not very many of them, and they're sort of a car that, due to modern safety regulations, really can't be recreated. And so I think over time they're going to go up the same way we've seen Defenders go for the last 10 to 15 years, and they'll eventually sell for an awful lot of money because it's the kind of thing that you really can't find anything else that's quite like it. And so if I could fit in one a little bit more comfortably, I'd get an Exige 260 or something like that because I think they're great cars. And those were pretty reliable, but when the Evora came out, it was a little bit of a different story. It was not a terribly well constructed car, and we started to just see a lot of issues. And they would just do these strange things when they built them. And it was a time when Lotus as a brand was particularly insolvent, and so you'd see some strange things. But for a while, they used red wires for the negative battery terminals. And the cars use these tiny little batteries to add lightness. And so if you park them for 3 or 4 days, it will be dead when you return to the car. And so I would have to go out to somebody who'd shown up to try to test drive one, and presumably you'd be interested in buying it, and jump start the car every time. And if you're doing it quick and it's been a little while since you jumped one, I, at one point, positive to the red wire and caught the thing on fire in front of the customer. Fortunately, there was a car cover there because we can kind of smother it out, so it wasn't that big of a deal, and I guess the electrical system limited the damage, and it started right up. We drove it, and he ended up not deciding to buy it, unsurprisingly. But they would use this unbelievably cheap, thin leather on the dashboards and the airbag covers that would always shrink. I mean, if you parked one outside for 3 or 4 weeks, it would start to bow on the edges and creep back from the seams, and it was just a nightmare. And the warranty would cover it, but sometimes it would take 6 or 7 months to get a new dash. And when you got it, you wouldn't want to put it right in because you knew it was going to happen again. And so you'd sort of wait till you thought you had the car sold, then get it into the shop. And the timing never really mattered because the cars were usually in inventory for at least 8 to 12 months before they would leave. So they were very, very challenging cars to sell. And I was really excited about the Evora when it came out. I mean, I thought, it's a perfect price point. It's a great brand with a ton of racing heritage. This is going to be a lot of fun. But the Camry motor they put in it was just completely lackluster, and I could never love the car as much as I wanted to. It looked great, but just the build quality was so weird, and they leaked water everywhere, and that water, particularly in Georgia, would attract ants. And the weather stripping wasn't that tight, so they would get right in, and it was not that uncommon to walk out to one in the summer and literally find the car filled with ants. And the only way you can really get that number of ants out of a car is to overheat the inside for their body temperatures. And so if you turn the heat to max and then just park it in the sun for a few hours, all the ants will leave, then you just move it and you just spray underneath or whatever. But we had that happen all the time. And it was interesting to sell a Lotus because the best way to do it actually was to try to talk the buyer out of it. They come in with kind of this martyrdom complex that they want an uncomfortable and unaccommodating car, and what you really want to do is make them continually say that, kind of walk them through the logic of saying, well, they're not that comfortable and there's not that many creature comfort features that are going to make the car nice and accommodating. And so, yeah, I love it. I love a race car, all the lights weight, and I don't need any of that garbage. Yeah, so, but I mean, that because of this construction, they're a little bit hard to work on, so the labor times are a little bit longer, and you're not going to go out and find independent service because really you need someone like our techs that are trained for this stuff. Oh yeah, I get it. It's a race car. It's what I want. I want to, really have something that's a real driving machine. Okay, all right. And that because of that, some of the consumables go pretty fast: tires, brakes, clutches, things like that, and they can be a little more expensive. Absolutely, trickle down Formula One technology. That's what I'm looking for. Yep, let me have it. And they're pretty rare, so if you're looking at a pre-owned one, we're not really going to be able to pick out your favorite colors or anything. It's really, what we've got is because they're hard to find. Yep, I get it. I'm just glad to have a rare car. It's exactly what I want. And every time you say something, you're like, yes, I want to buy it. Yes, I want to buy it. And they're disregarding these logic hurdles that normally you'd have to overcome to convince someone. So that's what I would do, is just try to tell them why they shouldn't buy it, and they always would buy them. They were pretty easy cars to sell, particularly the Elise Exige. And really, the Evora kind of became the car that people bought because they didn't know they made Caymans. And they wanted something a little bit more unique and a cool British feeling sports car. I had one guy who his car just developed the most atrocious squeak rattle thing around the top of the dash or the A-pillar. It was probably the A-pillar because those tended to crack. It was miserable to drive, and he came in once and he said, "Ed, the only way I can tolerate driving my car is to turn my Adele all the way up so she's just screaming and I can't hear how loud the car is. We've got to get it fixed." And I'll tell another story about that customer and some others at one point, because that was the only customer I've ever known to get trade assistance from a manufacturer to buy a car from another manufacturer in order to keep him from lemon lawing the car. So that'll be a good one for another day. But I had this other guy come in and he just seemed literally certifiably insane. And he really wanted an Evora, and he had like 25 or 30 grand to put down. And so on a $65,000 car, that was something manageable. And he had decent credit, but not much experience. And we ended up getting him a loan. But as we were going through it, we're like, we have to do everything exactly by the book on this deal, because if we don't, we're going to end up owning this car, because there's a pretty good chance this guy does not have the full intention to make all of the payments he's becoming obligated to. And so he drove it, and he came back a couple weeks later, and the entire car was just destroyed. I mean, he had curbed every wheel, scratched every panel, and he told us this crazy story about how he was trying to go and protest some appearance of Joe Biden, and the Secret Service had started chasing him, and he tried to make this turn too tight, and he hit one of these poles, and I mean, goodness gracious. And unsurprisingly, he didn't make any of his payments, and if you don't make any of your payments, in most cases, the dealer is responsible to buy the car back from the bank. And so we ended up having to help them find it and do it. And the only place I ever saw the car after it had left the dealership was at a local, very suspect massage parlor. But we got the car back, got it reconditioned, and did okay getting out of it because he had put so much money down. That is one thing about Lotus owners. They fancy themselves the shrewdest of negotiators. I remember at one point I had a guy call me about an Esprit that we had. And I love Lotus Esprits. The first sports car I ever tried to buy was actually a '94 Esprit S4. And I loved it. I love the lines. It's just so exotic for the price point that it occupies, but they are miserable to keep running, and there is always something wrong with it. But we had one, I think it was a '98 twin turbo V8 car, and it was working at the time, and we were kind of like, all right, we got to get this thing out of here. And so I had this guy call, and he was interested, and he made me a low but not like hugely insulting offer. And I said, all right, so if we can do your number, I mean, I'm not saying that we can, but if we do, you're committed. You're going to come here tomorrow and you're going to write us a check for the car. And he said, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm in, I want the car. And so I said, all right, let me go work on my manager and see if we can get the deal put together. So I hang up with him and go over there to talk to my boss, and I say, this is what this guy wants to pay. He says he's going to come here and do it. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a complicated deal. He doesn't need to finance. And I know it's low, but I know at the same time, like, I don't really want to deal with this car all that much more. And they agreed, and they eventually said, all right, let's just do this guy's deal and let him have it. So I call him up and I said, you know what, congratulations. It was a long, kind of a long shot, but we got it done. We're going to do your deal. So let me know what time you want to be here tomorrow. And he said, all right, well, I'm going to look around and shop a little bit more and call about a few more cars over the next couple of weeks. And if I don't find a better deal, then I'll do what I said and I'll come pay for the car. I said, that's not what you said at all. And he said, yeah, but that was really just me testing you because I wanted to see if you were going to be reasonable and negotiate. And I said, are you kidding me, sir? I said, well, let me tell you what. In that same time where you were testing me, I was conducting my own sort of test. And that was whether or not you were an honorable and trustworthy person that I could believe was going to do what they said they were going to do. And guess what? You failed that test. So I don't care if you want to buy this Esprit or anybody else's Lotus. You're not going to buy this one from me. So have a good day and don't bother coming. But the whole showroom kind of got quiet because obviously my voice carries, and I'd gotten a little bit forceful towards the tail end of that exchange. And my boss came over after I'd hung up the phone, and he was like, Ed, you really can't talk to customers that way. And I said, well, he wasn't going to be a customer. We were at no risk of selling him anything. And I was right. We never heard from him again.
Are you looking to buy your dream car? Premier Financial Services offers the flexibility of financing with the tax benefits of leasing. The PFS Simple Lease offers quick approvals and easy termination when you are ready for the next car. Visit our website and follow us for more.